Chairman Christoph Husken, dear friends, colleagues, good afternoon. The past year of 2023 witnessed much turbulence in our world and many challenges facing humanity. The global economy was weighed down by protectionism and the abuse of the security concept, and the international system was impaired by unilateralism and bloc politics. While the Ukraine crisis continued unabated, conflicts flared up again in the Middle East. In the meantime, AI, climate change, space, and the polar regions were posing a whole new set of challenges. Against that backdrop, the key message I wish to deliver here is this: no matter how the world changes, China, as a responsible major country, will keep its major principles and policies consistent and stable, and serve as a staunch force for stability in a turbulent world. First, China will be a force for stability in promoting cooperation between major countries. Major countries shoulder critical responsibilities for global strategic stability. President Xi Jinping noted that major country competition is not the prevailing trend of current times. For major countries, the more volatile the international landscape, the greater the need to enhance coordination, and the more acute the risks and challenges, the greater the need to advance cooperation. This year is the 45th anniversary of China-U.S. diplomatic relations. Past experience and lessons show that when China and the U.S. work together, great things can be accomplished for the two countries and the entire world, while a confrontational posture hurts both sides and the world. At the end of last year, the Chinese and U.S. presidents held an important summit meeting, which laid out a future-oriented San Francisco vision. China will firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests and act in a sense of responsibility for history, for the people, and the for world, work with the U.S. to implement the common understandings between the two presidents, and move bilateral relations forward along the right path of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. Russia is China's largest neighboring country. A China-Russian relationship that grows steadily on the basis of non-alliance, non-confrontation, and not targeting any third party meets the shared interests of the two countries, serves the strategic stability of the Asia-Pacific and the world, and represents a useful exploration of a new model of major country relations. China and Europe are the world's two major forces, markets, and civilizations, and should understand the international responsibilities on their shoulders. A more stable and closer relationship between China and Europe not only works to the advantage of both sides, but also brings benefits to the whole world. It is imperative that China and Europe stay clear of geopolitical and ideological distractions, see each other as partners rather than rivals, and join hands to inject positive energy into a volatile world and point the way for overcoming difficulties together. Second, China will be a force for stability in addressing hotspot issues. We have worked to explore a Chinese way of addressing hotspot issues, one that advocates for non-interference in internal affairs and opposes imposing one's will on others, upholds impartiality and justice and opposes pursuing selfish interests, seeks political settlement and opposes using force, aims to address both the symptoms and root causes, and opposes myopia and one-sidedness. With China's active mediation, a historic reconciliation was reached between Saudi Arabia and Iran, setting off a wave of reconciliation across the Middle East. This is a living example of implementing the global security initiative put forth by President Xi Jinping. The recent escalation and spillover of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the ongoing tension in the Red Sea once again demonstrate that the question of Palestine is at the heart of the Middle East issue. Generations of the Palestinian people have been displaced, unable to return to their home till this day. This is the longest-lasting injustice in our world. China has stood firm on the side of fairness and justice all along, vigorously working for an end to the conflict and for the protection of civilians. China pushed the UN Security Council to adopt the first resolution since the latest conflict broke out and issued a position paper on the political settlement of the conflict. China calls for accelerated efforts in establishing an independent state of Palestine and the convening of a more broad-based and effective international peace conference to truly fully realize the peaceful coexistence between Palestine and Israel. On the Ukraine crisis, China has never given up on promoting peace or slackened its efforts to facilitate talks. President Xi Jinping had in-depth exchanges with world leaders, including Russian and Ukrainian leaders, playing a constructive role in addressing the crisis. China also published its position paper on this matter, and its special envoy traveled intensively to mediate among different parties. Behind all this, there's only one goal that China hopes to achieve, that is, to build consensus for ending the conflict and pave the way for peace talks. China has made tireless efforts for the political resolution of the Korean Peninsula issue. Now, the most pressing task is to prevent a vicious cycle, address relevant parties' reasonable security concerns, and de-escalate and stabilize the situation. On Myanmar, with China's efforts, various parties of the country signed a ceasefire agreement in the Chinese city of Kunming, firmly safeguarding peace and stability in northern Myanmar. China encouraged ASEAN to facilitate the proper settlement of the Myanmar issue without interfering in the country's internal affairs. China also actively supported Afghanistan in building an inclusive political framework and adopting moderate policies to forestall the resurgence and spread of terrorism.
With a vast territory and over a dozen neighboring countries, China faces complex disputes left from history. On that, China has stayed committed to managing differences through consultation and resolving disputes through dialogue. China stands ready to work with ASEAN to accelerate consultations on a code of conduct in the South China Sea, advance maritime cooperation and joint development, and build the China-South China Sea into a sea of peace, cooperation, and friendship. Third, China will be a force for stability in enhancing global governance. The international system today is under serious strain from unilateralism and power politics. It has thus become a common call of the international community to revitalize multilateralism and work in solidarity to pulse through. In China's view, the authority and central role of the United Nations can only be further strengthened, not weakened. And the purposes and principles of the UN Charter are all the more important, not outdated. China has dispatched the most peacekeepers among the permanent members of the UN Security Council and is the second largest contributor to the UN regular budget and peacekeeping assessment. China supports the Security Council in playing a primary role on peace and security. We support the UN in holding the Summit of the Future to explore more solutions to the challenges. In the face of the climate threat, China has contributed to the UAE consensus at the COP28 UN Climate Change Conference. China will cut carbon emissions by the biggest margin in the world in the shortest time frame in history, and will, without doubt, deliver on this commitment. When it comes to challenges from AI, China supports establishing an international AI governance institution under the UN framework to jointly safeguard humanity's well-being. China worked actively to enhance solidarity and cooperation of the Global South. China promoted the historic expansion of BRICS and gave support to the African Union to join the G20, with a view to increasing developing countries' representation and voice in global affairs and contributing to a more balanced and effective global governance architecture. As the largest developing country, China has been doing its best to provide more public goods to the world. From the Belt and Road Initiative to the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative, China has stayed committed to cooperation, openness, and equality, and contributed its share to meeting global challenges. In strengthening global governance, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected. Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory, and Taiwan affairs are China's internal affairs. To observe basic international norms, the One China principle must be upheld. To preserve peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, Taiwan independence must be firmly rejected. Fourth, China will be a force for stability in promoting global growth. I know that many of you follow the Chinese economy closely. Let me say that the Chinese economy, as vibrant and resilient as ever, is showing a more robust momentum for long-term growth. Last year, the Chinese economy grew by 5.2%, accounting for one-third of global growth. As China grows into the world's largest market rapidly, it will bring more dividends to the rest of the world. It is widely shared in the global business community that the next China is still China. Focusing energy on realizing Chinese modernization is the biggest political consensus of the Chinese people right now. Seeking faster progress in high-quality development is of paramount importance for China in the new era. As President Xi Jinping pointed out, China will only open its door even wider to the world. We will continue to expand institutional opening up, shorten the negative list on foreign investment, and foster a more market-oriented, law-based business environment up to international standards for companies from Europe and from around the world. Now, China has mutual visa exemption arrangements with 23 countries and applies unilateral visa-free policy to multiple European countries. We will continue to provide more facilitation for people from around the world to invest, travel, and study in China. Today, rejecting decoupling has become an international consensus. More people have come to realize that the absence of cooperation is the biggest risk. Those who attempt to shut China out in the name of de-risking will make a historical mistake. The world economy is like a big ocean that cannot be cut into isolated lakes. The trend toward economic globalization cannot be reversed. We need to work together to make globalization more universally beneficial and inclusive, so that more countries and people can benefit from the process. Friends, a German proverb says, "Those who work alone add, those who work together multiply." This is also true for state-to-state relations. We hope that all countries can seek win-win and avoid lose-lose. Let us work together like passengers in the same boat to bring more certainty to the world and usher in a brighter future for humanity. That is my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellency, for your remarks, and thank you in your last remark to picking up the motto of this conference, which is lose-lose, but with a question mark, because we want to look at a silver lining. And thank you for participating in a discussion. This conference, again, as in the last 2 years, was very much focused on Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We had yesterday the testimony of Yulia Navalny here. We had President Zelensky here. We have in the neighboring hotel, the Rosewood Hotel, we have an exhibition on the horror that the war brought to Ukraine. And I want to come back on this, and in 1994, the so-called Budapest Memorandum was agreed. The Budapest Memorandum asked from Ukraine to get rid of all its nuclear weapons, and in return, Russia and others guaranteed its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, China at the time, member of Security Council, endorsed it, and your colleague, Sergei Lavrov, was the ambassador to the UN and made it to a document of the Security Council. This is where we stand, and this is where we stood when 2 years ago the aggression took place, where this document of Security Council was not honored. You mentioned that you have been active in trying to resolve the crisis, which we appreciate. But at the same time, when you look at the economy, we saw that in 2022, the trade between Russia and China increased by 30%. This year, last year it increased by 25%. We are at $240 billion trade. And my question to you, if I may, shouldn't you put some more pressure on Russia and also some economic pressure to make sure that what you said in your speech, the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, is preserved, and that we strengthen the UN, because after all, this is a document of the Security Council which was violated by Russia.
The Budapest Memorandum was signed by the US, UK, and Russia. China is not a party to the memorandum, but through a national statement, we recognized this memorandum. We can't decide what other countries do, but on China's part, we have honored our commitment faithfully. We articulated clearly to the world that China will not use nuclear weapon against non-nuclear weapon states, and will have not first use nuclear weapon against any country, including Ukraine. President Xi has stated that a nuclear war cannot be fought and nuclear weapon cannot be used. This is something that all sides must be observe, and the security of the nuclear facility must be protected. And China has fulfilled its international obligation. China did not start the Ukraine crisis or participate in it, but we did not sit idly by and watch it from a distance. We did not exploit the situation, but instead we've been facilitating peace talks. President Xi has stated clearly China's position. That is, first, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected. And second, the purposes and principles of the UN Charter must be fully observed. And third, the legitimate security concerns of all countries must be taken seriously. And fourth, all efforts that are conducive to peace must be supported. So, acting on those basic principles, China has been working relentlessly to promote peace and promote peace talks. Now there are not ripe conditions in place for parties to go back to the negotiating table, but as long as there is hope, we will not give up our efforts. The earlier the peace talks, then the loss of all parties will be reduced. As for China's relations with Russia, in my opening remarks, I said that the no alliance, no confrontation, and not targeting any third party, that is the principle. It's a normal relationship between two major countries. We are opposed to any attempt to blame China or to shift the responsibility of resolving the Ukraine crisis to China. Well, China has done a lot of constructive work, and we will continue to play our positive role on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this response. Let me stay with business questions. In the last 2 months, two German companies, Volkswagen and BASF, came into trouble because over business dealing with Xinjiang. There is Germany and EU have passed new regulations for human rights standards in supply chains. and human rights situation for the Uyghurs in Xinjiang is going to stay a political and economic issue. You remember a couple of years ago there was a report of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. What can you do to resolve this issue, and are you planning to do something so accusations about forced labors are no longer coming from your country?
About Xinjiang, we have seen so many fabricated information from different parties. I will give you some basic numbers. Since the establishment of the autonomous region, the Uyghur population has grown from less than 2 million to 12 million now. So the so-called genocide is sheer fabrication and a lie. The average lifespan of Uyghur population has risen from only 30 to 75.6 years. Isn't that a best example of how we are safeguarding human rights there? The religious freedom in Xinjiang is effectively guaranteed. For every 530 Muslims, there is a mosque supported by the government, funded by the government. The ethnic culture and language, Uyghur or of other ethnic groups, are all well protected. Government documents and the brand names of those merchandisers, they use different languages. They use both the standard language in China and also their ethnic language. We have the most advanced system for that in the world. The so-called forced labor is only a groundless accusation. People in Xinjiang, including the Uyghur population, don't they enjoy the right to employment? Don't they enjoy the freedom to choose their jobs? If we use forced labor as an excuse to deprive them of their right to employment so that their products cannot be sold, is that a safeguard for human rights? Is that in line with the humanitarian spirit? I really suggest that all of you can visit Xinjiang. Xinjiang is open to all that are interested to visit. Although there were some difficulties due to COVID-19, but we still have many visitors from different parts of the world to Xinjiang. No matter what kind of political stance they have, what are their backgrounds, there is one consensus that among them that what they see in Xinjiang is totally different from what they see in the Western media. To see is to believe. What is the reason behind their effort to fabricate so many lies about Xinjiang? They are trying to stop the development of China. And China's development is a source of disturbance for some countries. Chinese people have the right to development, to a better life. 1.4 billion people heading towards modernization, isn't that a major progress of humanity? If we have such a huge-sized market here in China, products from different countries can enter this market, so we can realize common prosperity. That is why President Xi Jinping pointed out that we live together in this global village. We're passengers on the same boat. We need to transcend the differences we have. We need to cherish our shared planet to build a community with a shared future for mankind. This is what China's intention is, and we hope to get your support and understanding on that.
Thank you very much. I think there is a worldwide recognition what China has done over decades to bring so many people out of poverty into into the possibility to have a decent life. But I take up, and thank you very much for the offer also for visits in Xinjiang so that people can see with their own eyes. You mentioned trade, which is very important. We are seeing right now how the freedom of navigation is threatened in the Red Sea. We see also that there are more and more risky encounters at sea in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, which is due to a Chinese show of force. How can we avoid these incidents in the future? And is there a chance that China agrees to a code of conduct for the South China Sea?
Well, first I want to say that the Taiwan question cannot be compared with what's happening in the Red Sea. The Taiwan question is China's internal affairs. Taiwan is a part of China. It has never been a country. Well, in 1943, China, the United States, and the United Kingdom issued the Carroll Declaration, and I see in the audience the Foreign Minister of Egypt. It stated clearly that all the territories Japan has stolen from the Chinese, such as Taiwan, shall be restored to China. And in 1945, the Potsdam Declaration was signed, which reiterated that the terms of the Carroll Declaration shall be carried out. So for Taiwan to be returned to China is a basic requirement, and due to the Chinese Civil War, the two sides across the strait have yet to be reunified, but it will be realized. This is the strong will of the 1.4 billion Chinese people and the trend of history. Who is opposing reunification and who is purporting independence? It is the DPP that's governing the Taiwan island. So to uphold the One China principle, one needs to support the peaceful reunification of China, and to safeguard peace across the strait, it is essential to oppose Taiwan independence, because Taiwan independence is irreconcilable with peace across the Taiwan Strait. When it comes to the South China Sea, the South China Sea islands have all along been Chinese territory. And when China exercised administration over those islands, the countries surrounding those neighboring countries were not even established. But in the 1960s and 70s, when China was going through the Cultural Revolution, China's neighbors occupied some of the islands reefs of the Nansha Islands, which caused disputes as we see them today. But China has exercised restraint, and we've been pursuing dialogue and negotiation to resolve those issues, not like some major country which resorts to force easily. But China's approach is dialogue. So in 2002, China signed with the 10 ASEAN countries the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, the DOC, which helped to safeguard freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. And in recent years, China suggested that we upgrade that and negotiate a code of conduct in the South China Sea. And we've agreed with ASEAN countries that the COC should be more binding, more substantive, and be in keeping with international law, including UNCLOS. Now the text of the COC we have finished 3 rounds of reading. We believe that as long as we work in solidarity with ASEAN and stay clear of distractions, we will be able to conclude a COC in the South China Sea. Between China and ASEAN countries, we have the wisdom and ability to safeguard peace and stability in the South China Sea and safeguard the freedom of navigation and overflight there, and also safeguard the legitimate rights of other countries in this region. As for the Red Sea, it is a typical spillover from the fighting in Gaza. China has been calling publicly for parties not to harass the commercial ships in that area, to safeguard the security of the waterway. But actions must be taken in accordance with international law and with mandate from the Security Council. To address the Red Sea issue, the root cause must be resolved. And the root cause is the ongoing fighting in Gaza. China's position is clear on that. First, an immediate ceasefire must be realized. No more fighting. And second, to make sure the humanitarian corridors are unimpeded. And third, hold an international peace conference as soon as possible to revive the two-state solution. We cannot allow this humanitarian disaster to continue anymore. Nearly 30,000 civilians have lost their lives in the fighting. And there are also many lives who are who were unaccounted for. We cannot allow the situation to continue in the 21st century. Now, generations of the Palestinian people have been displaced, unable to establish an independent state. We simply cannot allow the situation to continue. So there should be a more concerted voice. There should be a more unified position. We should call for a proper settlement of the question of Palestine, which has been lingering on for more than 70 years. Efforts should be made toward a two-state solution. Only when that is realized can the state of Palestine and State of Israel live in peace, and with assurance from the international community, can enduring security be enjoyed by Israel. A country cannot establish its security on the insecurity of others. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Excellency, for your readiness to take these questions, for your contributions, for the discussion. We really appreciate it, and you ended up where we started, with the Secretary General of the United Nations making a plea for the rules-based international order, for the respect of the UN, for the respect of UN resolutions, and we hope that this remains the common basis in the coming year. And can I already extend an invitation to you to come back next year?
明年中国肯定要派团来的。
And the next year, China will continue to send a delegation. On this arena, we stand ready to share our views with all parties to make China's contribution to global peace and stability. China is the country with the best record in terms of peace and security. We have never started a single war, and we have never participated in a single war, and we have never tried to subvert other countries' government. China's development represents a growth of force for stability and for peace. We hope that countries will view China's development in an objective and perspective and out of goodwill, so that we can realize common prosperity and common development together, to avoid the situation that is mentioned in the theme of this conference, a lose-lose situation. We need to seek win-win. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next session will continue momentarily, so please, everybody remain seated. We'll continue in just a moment.